And this is mostly around lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender issues, but larger than that, Equal is also an anti-racist organization, and an organization that takes on issues of class to the socioeconomic issues. And that's, I guess, so to answer the question, like, what fight is mine? My fight is any movement towards social justice. That I strongly believe that our LGBT organizations and our anti-racist organizations need to be in coalition, because these issues affect all of us. So my fight is for anyone who is marginalized in our society.
Beautiful, thank you. Daniel?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Silva, and I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. And I'm also on the Board of Directors for the Young Latino Professionals of Greater Kansas City. And as I thought about your question, I jotted down a few notes, and I think for me, it's important to continue to educate and create awareness around important issues that hopefully will lead to advocacy, which hopefully will lead to leveling the playing field and right social inequities.
Thank you. Oscar?
First, I want to thank God for life and opportunity to live life. My name is Oscar Bowden, founder of an organization called The Posse, which is a peers organized to support student excellence. And my fight has always been young people, getting them to see the next level because they are our leaders. I used to hear it all the time that we are tomorrow's leaders, but I don't see us being raised to be leaders. I think a lot of times we miss the boat on that. And so when we talk to young people, when I talk to parents, I always remind them of the movie Lion King. And I remember in the movie, he took his son and he showed him everything that they ruled that's going to be theirs. And every day of his life, that little lion cub was being raised to one day become that leader. It's the same thing when we think about kings and queens. When they're babies, they're every day of their life, they've been groomed to become leaders. We're not doing that with our children. We groom them and raise them up to go work for somebody. We groom them to work to actually get up under somebody else's wing. And I think that my fight is for young people today to have an opportunity to actually be those leaders that we say they are.
All right.
Please raise your hand if you voted in the last election. Please keep your hands raised if you saw any dogs at the polls waiting for you. Any of you guys know dogs? No dogs? Okay, so Nia, founder of 1840, we don't see dogs. I haven't had to take a test. Cold tag, I'm not paying anything. I don't see color signs. Dr. Hill spoke earlier to this new mindset about being this post-racial, post-gender, post-LGBTQIA community issues. Like, we're past all of this. Why is 1840 still relevant today?
To be honest, when I started 1840 Vote, when I was presented with that challenge, the issue around voting was that I was trying to go out there with the fact that we don't vote, and we didn't at that time have something holding us back. There was no dog there keeping us from going. But then after getting into it, I realized the dog is still there. It's called the Voting Rights Act. There is other ways that people are trying to utilize to prevent us from voting, and the fact that we don't vote like we should be, if we don't exercise that right, we're really hurting ourselves. So, we can bark at them and say, you're presenting this Voting Rights Act, but at the same time, bark at yourself to say, I'm not even voting. And if you vote every 4 years, we did some studies and found out if you voted only between 2008 and you came back and voted, 2013, you missed roughly 13 elections in Kansas City. 13. That was around education, your state representatives, taxes that you pay that other counties don't pay for the benefits of them and not you. There are a number of things that get past you because you are not aware. So there may not be a physical dog there may not be a poll tax, but there's a voting right, there's a voting tax, a voting law that they're trying to put in place. And there are going to be more things that they're trying to do to hinder you from doing that. So right now, civil rights is still relevant, but it wears a different mask. And we need to recognize that.
Thank you, Nia. Any other panelists want to speak to the new mask that civil rights is wearing today? I'm going to come to you. What's the biggest challenge you see facing the communities you represent, sir?
How you doing?
I think the biggest challenge, there's a lot. I think, like Mia said, I think that there are a lot of elements, a lot of people right now trying to sort of get access to the vote, and that affects primarily poor people of color. I think that's a big issue that we need to be addressing, and I'm so glad that the work you do with 1840 to address that. I think specifically, like, I think in the LGBT movement, I think a lot of times marriage is the primary focus. But because I work mostly with youth, that's the people that I represent. They're not really as interested in marriage. I think there's an important ripple effect that will have. But the homeless rate of LGBT youth is astronomical compared to the general population. Same thing with access to quality education, especially for homeless access to adequate health care. So again, I think that we have to act in coalition with these movements. I don't see.
And can you speak to sort of the larger fight that you see yourself as a part of within the community that you serve or represent?
Sure. In case everyone, you can't tell, I am Latino. Again, a lot of my focus has been in and around the Latino community on the national and local level. But again, I think one of the things that we're really trying to be very thoughtful about is to bridge to other communities and work closely with other communities, understanding that we are not in any of these fights alone, but I think it's important for us, if the issue is important, to be able to educate our counterparts on that issue and why it's important to us, and also understand that there are issues in other communities that are close to us as well. But I think the issue has been that we too often as communities have been siloed from one another and have not really bridged that gap, if you will, in terms of working together, advocating for one another. I think it's very powerful when someone who may not be affected by the immigration issue, and although we all are affected, it is powerful when someone stands up for you that is not personally affected and advocates for that issue. Just as it's powerful for me or for someone from the LGBT community to have an ally who is heterosexual. I think it's important for us to build allegiances, form alliances, and work together. I think that's the only way that we're really going to start to move the needle. I don't believe that the civil rights movement is over. I think that it has evolved, and I think the challenges that are upon us are really up to us, how we're going to take it on. And the one message that I always try to leave people with, the people I work with, is we have to really figure out how to leverage our networks and our resources. Because I think that's when we really can start to make a difference via the polls, via elected officials, what have you. But again, we can't do that alone in the Latino community. We definitely are reaching out and branching out to different communities. So I would like to see more collaboration.
Can I have another panel member speak to the importance of building those allies? Thank you, Oscar.
I think it's important because even with Posse, we worked with, like at Northeast High School 1 year, we had 19 different languages in that building. And when you have young people whose names is Muhammad, I mean, my first experience with that was like, okay, all right, sign your name, all right, and the teachers would call him down, and we had a list of students, and the young man put his name down, Muhammad. I said, okay, then what's your last name? What's your first name? He put Muhammad. I'm like, dude, you playing with me. I didn't know his name was Muhammad. But the thing about it is, if we all don't understand that every young person is actually going through the same thing, it's just in their own way. The problem we have is our young people today's youth have too many enemies. The enemy is the racism. The enemies are sometimes the elders, because you're too busy looking at their pants and you're not worried about what's in their mind. So you don't want to talk to them anymore. And the Bible says don't hit them with children, but we do it every day. You got to excuse me for believing in God. But the issue for me is we have to get beyond what we see. I know, man, look at the outward appearance, but you don't stop to see what's in it. You don't see the heart on top of my head. You got a heart. Maybe you have an issue. Maybe you need to break yourself down a little bit. So I really just that's the fight for me is to organize young people, but also listen, they can't do it by themselves. Remember, every generation should have been stronger. My mother should know the things that her grandmother taught her, that my grandmother taught her, and then my sister should know the things that my mother taught her, plus what her grandmother taught her. Why are the generations getting weaker? We're going backwards. So the fight is to mobilize that, teach them
My age is impacted.
Yes, how's your age impacted to the extent your voice is heard by your elders, especially being the daughter of the civil rights movement? How do you feel your age is impacted your voice?
It took a while for my voice to be heard. I had to shout, I had to jump, I had to do all these different things for my elders to listen to me. And it took a while. You know, I'm not 20-something years old anymore. I've done a lot of things. I tell others who are trying to do things, you know, they may not listen, but don't stop. Do something. Sometimes people need to see what you're capable of. And even still, I'm still trying to get my elders to understand and see us because, you know, we're not teenagers. I'm not in my early 20s, but I'm still considered young. I'm still considered, in a lot of people's eyes, someone's child. So my fight is still almost no different than the high school student who's trying to get their voice heard on different things. So over time, my voice has gotten a little louder because I've been out there and I've been trying. I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
No,
the new challenge, when you asked another part of it, you kind of bundled it up. There's some new challenges. So during that fight and during that time of me screaming and hollering and trying to get people to listen, and especially my elders to listen, I realized that there is a challenge with civil rights is that, you know, it's never ended. It's always here. It's wearing a new mask. It's disguised itself to say, yeah, you can vote, you can buy a house, you can start a business. But people don't realize it's a little bit harder to start a business. And there are some gaps in when you try to buy a house. And, you know, when the recession hit and all of a sudden we have, you know, vacant homes in predominant neighborhoods, all of a sudden, oh, now we got to do something. You know, it's so different because the problem that I see with my generation and the generations after me is that we don't know who we are. We have no idea about the civil rights struggle. We think Martin Luther King is all about the civil rights struggle, but he's not the only one. And there are so many people that go unrecognized, and there are so many things that go unrecognized that our children don't know. And that's why I'm such a strong advocate in African-centered education. That's why I was up there fighting up the street in Southeast when they were trying to take over our school. I had a child that go there. The ideology of African-centered education is just as old as me because it was something I grew up around. I'm a product of it. And if you want your children to come back, know who they are, and come back to the community and do something, then that is what you want. But the problem with that was that the idea that African-centered education was not good was turned against the rest of the community and made it seem like we didn't know, you know, what we were talking about, and it caused a fight. So our challenge now is really educating our youth, our generation, about what the issues are so that they can recognize when they are actually being discriminated against and when that the civil rights era is still on, it's still alive.
So I feel like I'm a teacher, so I feel like the time is much more objective me saying yes, right? So this is what the time is doing. So it seems like you represent a variety of, you know, organizations and communities. You mentioned, you know, racial-based, socioeconomic-based, you know, LGBTQIA communities. You speak to how your age impacts your voice in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is up here right now. You know, we're all pretty young, and I think that we probably all worked really hard to be here today. Because I do think it's very difficult when you're in your teens and 20s to get that recognition for the work that you've done. And I think that that's so important, right? I think that every movement was drawn on the previous movement before it, and I think that if we don't start elevating those voices, the voices of our youth, then we're going to be left behind. You know, as adults, we will be left behind because they know what their struggle is. You know, they do. We need to trust them and elevate those voices for what they're going through currently. I think that because Equal is such a youth-led organization, has made it very hard to get press, even though we send out press releases for every event. We usually have teenagers who are the ones who are the press contacts, and that makes it very hard to be taken seriously in the media. But we think it's really important that they're the ones that are given those opportunities. That they're the ones speaking for them because they have the youngest and the most relevant voices. That's your question.
You have like 37 seconds left. Can you speak to your age impact fighting?
Yeah, I think that I held my first protest at age 16 in Harrisonville, Missouri. I'm from a town of less than 1,000 people, so this desire to continue on the movement has always been a part of me. I think that I'm very appreciative of events like this that are elevating our voices as well as leaders in the community and giving us a chance to network, because I think that everyone in this room is an ally to everyone else in this room, and we need to be moving forward together. I just thank you all for being here and listening to our voices.
Daniel, thank you.
In terms of age, I think it's been a challenge to some degree, and I think I want to be taken seriously, and I think the way that we've been able to accomplish that, or I've been able to accomplish that, is to just kind of know what I'm talking about, right? And I think a lot of, especially in the Latino community, and I'll just speak from my own perspective, I think it's kind of been, they've been waiting to see if I'm going to prove myself or not. And I think one of the things that, young Latino professionals, I think that we're trying to learn from our elders is, they had such monumental roles in trying to create access and equality for the Latino community that they really were being very reactive at all times. And when you're out there being reactive, it's pretty hard to really put in place a succession plan or create a pipeline for that generation that comes behind you. And I think we've experienced some of that, where we have leaders in the community who have been CEOs or EDs or whatever organization for the last 30 years. And that's not a bad thing, but have they necessarily evolved with the time? Have they provided a platform for a younger person to assume the reign once they get into retirement age, which some of them are at that point? And I think for us, for the young Latino professionals, we're trying to be very proactive. And so even now, even though, we're all relatively young, we're already thinking about how we're going to prepare the generations behind us, how we're going to reach back and bring them forward to, when I see a high school student or I see a college student, I'm thinking of ways of how I'm going to recruit this young person to join young Latino professionals as I'm exiting out. If I see someone with potential, I'm trying to think of ways to put them in positions of leadership so that they can gain experience. And I think that wasn't always done for me, and I think I kind of had to learn that as I went along. But I feel that, YAWP has advanced, and I think we have caught the attention of a lot of people. Now we're just careful to not kind of be used as a token youth group, right, or the token youth professional group. We don't want to be that. We know what we're getting into, and we know what we're doing. So I think knowing what you're doing is first and foremost, but there's still a little bit of that. I professionally go by Daniel, and that's on purpose, because I feel that when I'm in a meeting and I say my name is Danny, I'm kind of treated a little different, especially if it's a young older person I'm interacting with. But that's just my take.
Wow. For me, I don't think it has affected as much, because a lot of young people don't really know how old I am. I don't tell them.
How are you?
My oldest son is 22 years old. Wow. So I get away when you look at you. That's shit what God can do. So for me, it's about getting understanding. Fellas, y'all know when you go out and buy that car and it's rusted and they got them old tires on it, but you already vision the paint you're gonna put on it. The women see it like, you gonna buy that thing, you can put your foot through the floor, but you already know how you want it. So when I walk into a room with young people, I already see like, man, I see her as that doctor, I see him as this mayor and the governor, I see her as the chief of police. I don't walk in there going, look at this man, look at her hair, look at this. I go in there, I already see what they can be. And so genuinely, anybody, if I walk up to you and I got a certain look on my face, you already know if I'm coming genuinely to say, hey, how you doing? Or genuinely if I'm looking at you like, So when we walk in the door, it's all about those young people. It's all about getting them to engage within their own rescue. And it's not about putting the umbilical cord, it's about cutting it, tying them to knots, say, okay, get up. But we have to start giving them understanding real quick. I had a 16-year-old young lady in my group, and the teachers warned me about her attitude. She cussed you out. There was only about 3 teachers she probably didn't curse out in that whole school. When she came into the posse group, she said, what's this posse stuff? I said, oh, shoot. I said, just grab a seat. I said, I'm going to tell you about it. She said, I don't know what this is. I said, look, I love your attitude. And she looked at me like I was crazy. I said, yeah, because if you was a lawyer, ooh, girl, you'd be the bomb. Straight up. She sat down, and I always ask 2 questions. I said, what would you change about yourself physically, and what would you change that happened in the past? Well, she said, well, I like myself the way I am. You know, I was like, cool. But then she had to answer the other question. And she said, well, I would change my attitude. Good answer? Unacceptable. It's too broad. What caused your attitude? She'd been molested by her grandfather from 5 to 9. Her cousin, her uncle, the guy she thought was her daddy. And then she comes to school and slept with half the school, and people are clowning her, dogging her, and treating her like trash, but not understanding what this young girl has been through. She cried for 20 minutes, and several other girls that hated her started crying because they've been through the same process. We have to go and find out what's going on with our babies. So that's why they started.
We're getting ready to go into Q&A from the audience after this last question. So start formulating your question in your head, especially Crystal Ray babies over there. Are all fights for civil rights the same? Do we see the need to approach these fights in the same manner for all groups? Who's ever ready to jump on it, can jump on it. We're gonna look at this.
I think it is the same. I think the strategies are different. I think the outcome that we want is the same, trying to find some equality for everybody, but I think we have to look at different strategies. And one thing we teach young people is not about your fist, but using your mind and your heart. So that's the best fight you can make. As a matter of fact, we teach the girls, I always call my girls the gangsters, and they say, I ain't no gangster in this high school. I said, yes you are. You come to school every day, even though your mama on crack, your daddy, you don't know who he is, your cousin just got murdered. You come to school every day. The gangster is not the gun, but you don't make excuses. You get up and go. Them young boys call us some gangster, I throw a book at them and say, break that down. They fold it up. I want to look at it crazy, and I always get an excuse why they don't want to go to class. That's not a gangster. You show up. So we change the mindset that way, and that's how the young people, they fight.
Awesome, thank you.
I want to agree with that. I definitely think that the strategy is different. I think there is a time and place to, I guess, take it to the streets and march and what have you. But I think where I'm coming from, the mindset is, let's educate as many of our young people as possible. Let's get them in those boardrooms. Let's get them in those positions of influence so they can really truly start to make those decisions top down and carry that perspective into that boardroom. I think sometimes, and I have actually one of my committee members here from where I work at, I just think it's very interesting sometimes when I'm sitting in my office and, I'm jamming to whatever radio station that I know no one else in that office is listening to. But I'm there, right? I'm there. I'm at that office. I'm at that table. And from that position, I'm able to advocate for equality and for rights and be a voice for those folks who may not be there. And I think that is a different strategy that I think we're taking on through education.
I think sometimes our struggles are different, but I think we could all relate it. I think that that if we're truly working towards social justice, then again, we're working for the most marginalized in our societies. I know that personally, Loretta Ross of Sister Song Women of Justice, or Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective, was one of the biggest influences in my life. Hearing her speak about intersectionality at 19 definitely changed my life. People like Audre Lorde, who wrote Sister Outsider and so many wonderful books, she is such an amazing influence on my life. And just like the civil rights movement leaders learned so much from the Gandhian movement, learned so much from India and South Africa, the movements going on there, we need to look to those movements and find inspiration. I know that reading the biographies of the Black Panthers has been instrumental in my understanding of our movement, what we're going through currently and historically, what wasn't taught to me in school and what should have been taught to me in school. I think, and people that, again, the intersectionality of our issues, like the fact that Barry Rustin, the organizer of the March on Washington, and one of Dr. King's top advisors was an out gay man in the 60s. I think that's something, we don't hear his name very much, but it's so important. And the fact that Fred Phelps and his Westboro Baptist picketed at Coretta Scott King's funeral because she had said that if Dr. King had not been killed, that he would have spoken out for gay rights. I think that while our struggles may not be the same always, we have to learn from each other and we have to move forward together. I think that's the only way that that will actually move towards social justice rather than just individual movements. I think that these these are also connected.
Our struggles are very different, and historically, that's the reason why I think we have similarities in our struggles. We can't say that they are the same. The Africans in American civil rights struggle is very different from your struggles, but we have similarities. I always get a challenge when people say those things. So I would say there are similarities. There are ways we can learn from each other, but they are very different. And that's what we do.
Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience who would like to spark that conversation between, multiple generations and how we can take these new challenges and make them into something tangible? Okay, so here's the thing. For questions, I'm going to ask you if it's a question or a comment. You have about 30 seconds to post either one, and then we'll ask the panelists to answer it. If I do this, it means I love you, but I gotta let you go. Okay, gentleman right here, please.
I'm Billy Kimball from the Human Rights Commission. I'd just like to know from the panelists how social media is affecting each one of your challenges and how you're using social media to further your causes.
We're absolutely using it 100%. I think it's for the better. I think you can either use social media for positive or negative ways. I think for us, we've really been able to leverage, our presence on social media to mobilize people, mobilize around an issue. With immigration reform being such a hot topic nowadays, and for us, it's not enough for 3 or 4 of our immigration attorneys to know the law and what it is. We have to inform our community, and how do we do that? It's through social media. We organize events and turn out people, 300, 400, 500 people turn out to our events because we're able to do it relatively quickly via social media. So yeah, I think it's pretty positive. Sorry. I'm fond of Facebook for the Facebook events. A lot of our members are also using Twitter. I think those two are very powerful, and I think Ian probably is all of the social medias.
She's on everything. She's on Instagram, Telegram, Facebook.
Social media is a blessing and a curse. Social media helps me get the word out, but social media has taught me, especially on Twitter, because I have a setup for 1840 Vote. I can't do Twitter as myself. I just sit there and I watch conversation. I'm like, what are these people working? What are they talking about? What is going on? It made me realize that we're not talking about these types of things. This is not our daily conversation. The things and the struggles that we need to deal with. Our daily conversation is, quoting a song, or talking about what I'm eating right now, and how this person ain't nothing, and miss me with that. It's not about make sure you get up and vote today. This is how important this is. Is your child at school today? It's not about any of those things. So it's a blessing and a curse. It doesn't matter how much I put out there. If they're not reacting to it, if they're not reposting it, if they're not sharing it, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
I agree with that, yeah, but I think what also social media has allowed us to do, and has allowed me to do, is find like-minded individuals. So when you post that information and I see it, I'm all over it, because that's what I'm passionate about as well. And so for that, I'm happy.
Absolutely. Maybe next year we can have a session on how to use social media as an organizing tool for the communities that we represent. Okay, next question. Question or comment, sir?
Good afternoon. My name is Archie Williams, and I grew up during the civil rights struggle and saw the as an African. But I want to give thanks to the Human Relations Department for putting on this forum and comments opportunity to have this discussion with you. I know that's some good people sitting up there. The message that I want to move forward is seeing African struggle. A lot of us don't understand that what caused his assassination was when he moved the ship from just civil rights to economics. We don't understand that when he was assassinated on the 4th of April, he was planning on being in Washington, D.C. on the 22nd of April with a Poor People's Campaign that looks very similar to the Occupy movement today. The whole issue of economics is real critical in the advancement of humankind. And his message then, and the message that I think that I would like the youth to carry forward as what caused his death is to address what economics are impacting the lives of not just people of color, but every one of us who live within the system. Study Dr. King's study where he was at the year in 67 up to his death in 68, what his efforts were, and moving that part of the civil rights movement forward. Economics. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm Diane Carroll, I'm in the USDA federal government, and I would like to address this to Nia or anyone else who may be answering. But when you were talking about voting, I found out months before voting, so many people contact me in the neighborhoods. I'm not a Missouri resident, I work over here, but I'm a Kansas resident. However, they contact me because they don't know who to vote for. In some kind of way, through the media, and not through that Twitter or Facebook, because it is a bunch of crap. But you need to get the message out there of their interest so they can know who to vote for, because I'm one person, and I can't tell everybody who they need to vote for. What are you interested in? What's important to you? What's important to your family, your kids, all of that stuff. We need more of that given out before voting time so people can know who stands for what and where they should go. Because if they call me like that, how many more need to call that can't call, that don't know, who would vote? You gotta know who to vote for, who meets your needs, what you need, your community, your family, everything like that. That's very important.
Absolutely, I totally agree. That's why 1840 vote is not partisan. I don't tell you who to vote for. I say, look, you need to go educate yourself, find the information here. I will try to provide some footprint for you. Because my generation is so socially active, I start there, but I try to get out in the community and talk to people. I'm one person. And my partner here, Erica, she's just another person. And we have to pull on our peers to really, word of mouth is the most powerful thing you can do to talk to them, because once you get them engaged about it, they're going to talk to somebody else. But that's the challenge that we have. How do we get the information out there to people who are not on Facebook or on Twitter? Because even if they are, they'll miss it because they're not paying attention. They don't care to listen, and they wait to the last minute. There were so many people for the presidential election that did not understand that in Kansas City, if you do not vote on a regular basis, you are dropped off that list. They say, hey, you don't vote, you don't care. Why keep you on the list? And people did not believe us when we got out. We went out to social events. We went out to soul sessions. We went out to different parties. We stood outside of clubs. And we said, look, you need to register to vote. If you haven't voted since 2008, you need to get registered, because you're going to go up to that line and they're going to say, ma'am, you're not in the system. And I had so many people the day after, because it just so happened that the last day to register to vote was right on my birthday. And the day after, they came to me and said, can I register? And I said, it's too late. You missed the vote. But you know what? You can register for the next election. But to answer your question, it's sometimes we just have to get out there. And sometimes it's just one or two of us. It's four of us here. And believe me, we get used five, maybe more in the audience, 6, 7. But we get utilized so much, we're a little worn out. And sometimes we need you to get that message out with us.
Thank you, Nia.
How y'all doing? I just want to stress the importance of knowing our Black history, or prior to Black history, actually, before 1492. Actually, if we actually knew who we were before 1492 and all of our accomplishments, we would actually be a better people and respect our own people as well as others. Until we actually get these issues addressed, it really will be a lot of still the same problems. You know, we need the Black economics as well. You know, that's very critical. You know, we had that going on in 1921. You know, so we really have to get back to practicing Black economics and actually know ourselves, know who we are. Prior to 1492, we weren't always called Black or African American. You know, we need to know what the Romans called us. You know, what were our accomplishments. I just wanted to make that comment as well. So.
That's right. My name is Chris Wade, I'm the Executive Director of the Justice Project, and we work with women and transgender women out on the streets. And one of the points that I wanted to make with Out of the 60 women that we're working very closely with right now, only 2 of them have computers or have any computer knowledge. A lot of our people are not literate, of course we work on that, but I think we need to remember that there are other ways to reach people other than through social media or through the computer access, because the people that I work with out in the streets who live under the bridge, or they're in a shelter, or they're sleeping down in Jurassic Park, they don't have access to computers. They don't even have library cards. They don't have anything. And we try to get them going on that, but y'all need to understand that you got to reach out in the old ways too, to reach the people who really need us the most. And these are the people, they don't have computers. They are not computer literate. We surveyed all age groups. I had people up there 75, 85 years old that we're working with that have no idea of anything about a computer. So I think it's really critical to know that even though a lot of people get computer literacy when they're younger, I've got people that haven't been to school since they were 11 years old and they're 50 now. Okay, so we really got to remember not to exclude this part of our population in the information loop.
Hi, I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters, social worker working with youth, and I commend you all for being here today. You guys are awesome. I did notice that 40% of the stage is female and 60% is male, and women make up 50% of the population. So there's a little disparity there. I'm a little loud. We'll let go. I've been saying for extra 20%. You be loud, speak up for us. I wanted you guys, everything you're saying is brilliant, and I think we're all taking it to heart, but we all know that actions speak louder than words. So I would love for each one of the panels to speak how we in the audience could take home one action today to better your cause. So very manageable, but we would love to all put our actions to match our hearts. So.
See, that was not closing remarks. I'm going to. Okay, so who's going to start us off?
Wow. I actually had a response to the lady's comment about not everyone has social media.
Oh, please, can you take 30 seconds for that and then a minute for action step?
Okay, one action step I think that we can all take away is, what role are you currently playing in uplifting not just yourself, but your community? And are you cutting across different communities to do that? It's not lost upon me that, I'm one of the few Latinos in this room right now. I would like to see a day where we have a conversation on civil rights or social justice, and it's a multicultural audience having that conversation.
Do you want to put these on to the access to social media?
Oh yeah, and then with the access to social media, I think, sometimes in the Latino community as we're working around immigration, we're working with folks that, sometimes don't even speak the language. And so I think we take it upon ourselves as the ones that hopefully can give voice to those voiceless people. And so when I mean that we create events and we reach out to people via social media, is to organize those folks that are in the know, educate them so that they can go out into the community and educate those folks. So that's the strategy, I think, in terms of the social media piece. But of course, we have to be out in the community to make a difference.
Thank you.
For me, I think it's just know thy neighbor. I do a lot of outreach, and it amazes me going to some of these neighborhoods or on certain blocks. The young person has been living on this block for 8 months and don't even know half the people on the block, or the man across the street, or the woman that stays next door. And I think there's a lot of resources right next door and across the street that our young people don't tie into. So I always encourage the men to come outside, and if the boys are playing basketball, go over there and talk to them. You can shoot the ball with them. You don't have to get out there and get sweaty, but shoot the ball and talk some life talk. Fellas, y'all know how to throw the fishing rod. Get some brothers and put the worm on there, throw it out, and talk about manhood, talk about being married. A lot of us are not married coming up, and thinking about it because the only time we see marriage is with our grandparents. And so it doesn't seem relevant a lot of times. So and ladies, same thing, a lot of these young girls, the way they dress, because they don't want to hang around because they don't have that. So we need to be able to say, okay, it's okay, let's cover you up. You're still a woman, you're still beautiful, you're still sexy, elegant, just as you are covered up, but it's an intellectual thing. So, I think that's the challenge that we have, and that's my one thing, is to get out and grab you 2 or 3. I always say reach one, but I say grab 2 or 3 of them and huddle up. Go take them to McDonald's, I don't care, but have that talk time. Okay, no. But have some talk time with them. You don't always have to just meet me at church. You you can see it in other places as well. Take some girls to the movies, see some movies that are relevant, and talk to them about life. I think that's important.
I think I second that. I think dialogue is the most important thing. I mean, I think there are a lot of political actions that we can take, and a lot of organizations that we represent are great places to go to find some of those. But I think leaning into our discomfort and having uncomfortable conversations and addressing our own privileges in the society, because it is a skewed society. I recognize that as a white person, I benefit from that systemic oppression. That's very unfortunate, but I need to use that to help bring everyone up. So I think that just dialogue with people that are from different backgrounds than us is really important. I think that so many of our issues can be resolved that way. And again, those uncomfortable conversations are the ones that we grow the most from. So I think facilitating that dialogue, listening to the voices, and elevating the voices of those who are oppressed, to be able to be the leaders in their communities rather than trying to be leaders for them, I think is super important. So.
Thank you.
You can't see me over there, can you?
I can hear him.
Okay, I'll stand up so you can see. I think the first thing is, I can tell you what I do. Start the 1840 Vote Project. I serve on the Kansas City Municipal Arts Board, so if you're interested in arts or anything in the city, especially with the current cultural assessment that's going on about the city of Kansas City as it pertains to arts and culture in the city, I deal with that. I deal with young professionals. I'm working with Daniel here to try to connect our communities as far as Black and Brown young professionals and how we can work together with the challenges that we face and how do we move forward as leaders in our community. There's a lot of things that I do. Talk to me. That's the only action I can give you right now. Not everybody's on Twitter and Facebook. We do have a thing called a digital divide. So, it's word of mouth. That's what it's always going to be. Talk to me, reach out to me, give me your card, give me your information. I promise I'll reach out back.
Daniel asks, what role are you currently playing? Do better. Also asks, don't reach one, teach one, reach two or a few. Wick says to use your privilege to facilitate a dialogue between those communities that we serve and represent. And then he said, holla back, reach out to her, let me know. She said she's involved in civic engagement and you should be too. Can we give a big round of applause to our panelists?
As Ms. Brown comes forward, we truly appreciate our panelists, our moderators. Give them all again. We're going to provide you with these tokens.
You want to stand up? Okay.
Young folks. And that's what this event is about, as I alluded to when we opened the program. These are our future leaders, whether we believe it or not, and we have some of them out in the audience today. As we get ready to go into our lunch program, it's time to do those shout-outs. We would like to especially thank the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Human Rights Commission, Parks and Rec Department, and of course the city of Kansas City, Missouri. All of the outreach participants were out in the Florida, United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, Human Rights Commission, Parks and Recreation, Neighborhood Housing Services of Kansas City, the Kansas City, Missouri Health Department / Aim for Peace, Bryant Real Estate, NAACP, National Association of Real Estate Brokers, Inc., Housing Information Center, Second Chance, I believe the AKAs are represented here. And last but not least, I want to do a special shout out for the police department. Stand up. We have a policeman here. I'm not going to have Mr. Herman to say anything, but just real briefly, everything that we talked about today is represented out in that hallway. We have social media represented. There's a social media company outside. Police department. Everything that's represented out there encompasses this room. Please take advantage of that. If we can just get maybe 1, 2, 3 parent, grandparent, father, grandfather to talk to that police officer, to get your grandson or your child interested at a young age about becoming a police officer. That's a special shout out for the Kansas, Missouri Police Department, because a lot of us call them, but we don't respect them. But when it's time to utilize them the way that we need to utilize them, that's when our young kids, I believe, the young kids are very important in our future. That's what I want to do for them. Thank you. Okay, 2 more things, evaluations. Remember I talked about the security guards? We already had somebody escorted back down here because they didn't turn theirs in. Don't let that be here. And I think that was my mother. I asked her if she could fill out her evaluation. She's here. So we don't want that to happen to you. Help us with those evaluations. Okay. Now, can I have everyone's attention, please? In your program is a luncheon menu. Please prepare to make your selection. In the back of your program, there's about 7 or 8 different menu items. Make your selection in your minds right now. When you go to that area, you're going to go to my left or to my right. There's equal amount of foods on my left and on my right. There's no need to rush. There's plenty for everybody. Please respect the disabled as they make their way to that area first. Some of the tables have been labeled as reserved. Please respect that. And before we go, we have about 10 minutes. We're going to take a 10-minute break and make our way back to that area. This is what we want to say in our prayer. For what we have, for what we're about to receive, let us be truly thankful. To those who planted the crops, to those who cultivated the fields, to those who gathered the harvest. For what we're about to receive, let us be truly thankful. To those who prepared it and those who served it. In this festivity, let us remember to those who have no festivity at all. Those who cannot share this plenty. Those whose lives are more affected than our own by war, oppression, exploitation, those who are hungry, sick, and cold. In the sharing in this meal, let us be truly thankful for the good things we have, for the warm hospitality, and for this good company. That concludes our morning program. Please follow the instructions. There's plenty of food. And remember, introduce yourself to someone you do not know, and just tell them hi and who you are. Call the gentleman.
One last thing. There are 4 tables on the back side of the curve here that are reserved. Other than those 4 tables, you're free to sit anywhere else. Thank you and enjoy your lunch.
He's a young man. I've been going for a long time. Wonderful musician, and every year he provides to music for us. So thank you, Phil. Give him a hand. My name is Nick Lee. Assistant Director of the Relations Department, also primarily responsible for all the city's civil rights enforcement, and I want to welcome you all to our 5th annual Civil Rights Fairhouse Summit. Let me give you one warning before we get started. Every year when I'm up here, I happen to notice that time clock right there is it's got 5 seconds on it. And every now and then I have a flashback to the 1969 Georgia State High School Basketball Championship game. There's 5 seconds left, and anyway. So if you see me do this, that's what it's just a reflex. And I pass anybody the whole time, they don't remember it. Thank y'all for coming. First thing that I have to do, people always come up and have me on to get this information and they don't know that I had very little to put this together. But I always get to pass information. But I have to talk about knowledge, wonderful staff, as well as some of the other people that helped us. So, first of all, please give the Civil Rights Enforcement team a hand. Nice, Brown, Richmond, nice. Brad Wills. Echo. Paul Pierce. Where's Bud? Tom Randall. Now, I also want to recognize the honorary members of the Civil Rights team. Ashley Blue. Ashley works out Ronnie Women's Business Enterprise Program. She always has this every year. I think we got almost the whole Randolph family helping us. Fella and how Randolph stand-up has been here today. Where are you at? I know they're back there. And I know he's got his sister, his niece, his mom, but all the time it's his family, they come out and help us every year. Denise Eason and Kathy Wade from Human Relations, they were also here at the registration table. They had to leave. Every year, this event is sponsored primarily by funding that we get from the U.S. Department of Housing and this is the housing line, so that's why the goal is April every year. So I want to thank the head staff. I know they were here. Any head staff there? They're here? I don't make it look so bad. I know they're going to workshop later on. We do have here Betty still here. We met her this morning. We also have 2 of the former regional directors of Fairhouse and Equal Opportunity with us today. The recently retired Brett Wilson. And before Myrtle, there was Robbie Herndon. Folks that I've been working with since 1990 when I got started on this. So we really appreciate our partnership with them. We also have some of our colleagues here from the Blue Commission on Human Rights. That's one of our sister agencies there, the state agency. And where is the commission? Y'all take a stand up. Commission, Human Rights Commission. Where's the Human Rights Commission? There's some other commissions in town. And I don't know if anybody's here representing the Relations Commission or any other commissions. Stand up. And you represent our Labor Commission. Thank you. One of our principal partners every year is the Kansas City Human Rights Commission. And this commission is a very active commission. They do a lot of things. They meet on the third Thursday of every month, 12 noon, and our office meets open to the public. They're wonderful people to work with. So I want Human Rights Commission. Here she comes. Also, this morning, we acknowledged all of the public officials and elected officials. And I see Councilman John Sharp has come in. He's not Councilman Sharp. I don't know if anybody else knows that. Councilman Sharp, of course, is one of our strongest supporters in terms of our civil rights enforcement. So we appreciate Councilman Sharp. Did you get along? Yeah, I wanted to. Y'all like this program? Lay out here. This is our flyer, our poster, and this is created by none other than Lawrence Wills. Hey, thanks, our photographer, so hopefully I see some a lot of people like this, so, if you want to now recognize Mike Bates. Mike, former director of human relations, he's the one that hired me. Mike? I made Mike look good for a long, long time. Every year we have former employees of the Human Relations Department who always come back to see us. Where are our former employees? I know some behind us. Here are the former employees. Rhonda ran our mediation team before they got cut out of the budget. I recognize the wonderful staff of the Parks and Recreation Department. I don't know if y'all do it or not, but as of yesterday, they're doing work at 63rd Street, so if you were traveling west on 63rd, you couldn't even turn into the main city anymore. I wouldn't so far to turn and come back. So we got down the park department, they opened it up for us. So that was a big help. Elston and his team, all of you do a wonderful job here at the Parks and Recreation Center. So I want to give a shout out to the Parks and Recreation. The evaluations. Now, I know Thomas told you about these are very important. This is what we use get an assessment of how we've done to improve the program we have here. So, where's that security? Okay, so anybody that tries to leave without runways, make sure you arrest them. This is important. We really need to do a lot of evaluation. Staff, did I miss anybody? Okay, and if I miss anybody, blame my staff to I want to,
this was a toner.
bring our guest speaker, and of course, his bio, the program. So I'm not gonna read that. I do know that the organization that he heads up down in New Orleans, the Fair Housing Council, I've been doing a lot of work in fair housing, like I said, since 1991. And there are government enforcement agencies like us, there are also private fair housing organizations that do work on their own. And one of the best private fair housing organizations in the country, of course, is the Fair Housing Council in New Orleans. And that's headed by our speaker today, James Perry. Now, I know he probably wouldn't like me to say this, but James is the husband of Melissa Harris Perry. And since we didn't get her, just kidding. But you know, that just happened to be. And of course, in my career in the house, I've heard a lot about James and the work that they've been doing, particularly post Katrina. Y'all know, and I think Martin talked about Katrina. By the way, give that was just the business. But he talked about some of the disparities after Katrina, particularly in terms of our people, and that was very much evident when it comes to housing. Almost video, big orders I was down there last year, and a lot of that Black looks like it did shortly after Katrina. And of course, there was a lot of discriminatory practices when it came to some of the funding that comes in and came in for housing. James can talk more about that. But this is very strong blood. He ran for mayor of New Orleans last time, and he says he's going to run again, so this time he's going to win. We're going to go down and help if we have to. But I want y'all to welcome our luncheon speaker for the day, always from New Orleans, Mr. James.
How are you guys doing today? Greetings from sunny, warm, not rainy, sunny, warm, warm. I was a little shocked when I arrived. I thought I was going to give my speech on the treadmill upstairs. And I don't know if you've seen my pot belly, but that was not going to go well. So I'm happy that we're here eating over lunch. And you know, I've learned over the years that folks really either love you or hate you when they invite you to speak during or after lunch, because that's when folks start to nod off and fall asleep and so on. So we'll see which one it is. We'll see if I'm able to keep you guys awake. I want to thank Mickey for bringing me out here. You know, Mickey, I think does a really incredible job. I've watched his work for a long time. And some of the work that the commission has been doing around people who are formerly incarcerated and trying to find housing opportunities for them, I think is absolutely incredible. So I think that this is, I think, a really interesting time. You know, I was looking at what was happening in the news this last week and wondering if I was going to even make it out to Kansas City. You know, you look at the Boston bombing happening, and the way that the entire city was shut down. And for a moment, we didn't know who had done it or why they did it. And so we didn't know if we were heading back to a 9/11 terror state or whether or not this was an isolated incident. And we found out, of course, that it was an isolated incident of terror. But, you know, I presume when speaking to a room of civil rights folks, and what's interesting for civil rights folks is that I think you guys know a little something about terror already. You know, when 50 years ago in Birmingham, Alabama, a church was bombed with 4 little girls there on a Sunday morning, I'm not sure that terror was the term that was used to describe it. But clearly, terror is a very real thing, and unfortunately, it's a fundamental part of civil rights work. So I want to try to talk to you guys about 3 basic concepts and bring those concepts together. I want to talk a little bit about citizenship, a little bit about poverty, and a little bit about fairness in housing. In 1903, W.E. Du Bois famously remarked, "What is it to be a problem? What is it to be a problem?" Of course, he was talking about African Americans. He was asking this question, what is it to be a problem? To be a person who's a citizen in a country, but to be perceived as a problem. So, I want to show you guys an image, and I want to get some feedback from you after I show you this image. Hold on one second, let me get some help from you. I want everyone to take a look at this image. I know it's a little small here in the back. This is an image of a lynching.
Hey, sure.
Can you see that? So tell me what you see. Tell me what's interesting about that image. So the first thing, can you keep it up for a second? So you notice that there are people who are there, and all of them who are white and who are just kind of hanging out. They're not embarrassed either.
Emery didn't do her job.
They're entertained. As a matter of fact, there's a couple in the front, and they look like they're on a date. What else do you see?
Lynching has solved the problem.
Lynching has solved their problem. Is I guess what's communicated here. But there's one other really interesting thing here. So let me ask this question a different way. Who in this image is not a citizen? Who in this image is not an American citizen? Well, that's what's interesting. Because everybody in the image is a citizen. Everybody in this image is a citizen. Thank you, Nikki. Every single person in that image is a citizen. Think about the fights that we have in modern day America over citizenship. The fight about whether or not people who have immigrated and do not have proper documentation, this question of whether or not they are citizens. The fight that they're engaged in, and the idea that there's a point in our community where the thing that they're fighting for, there are people who have that right, who are citizens, but their death is celebrated. It's where you bring your date for the evening. I'd argue that we have a long way to go before we get to this point of having true value around what it is to be a citizen. And we've seen these questions come up even just this past weekend, the questions around the Boston bombers and around their citizenship. And around how they should be prosecuted based on the fact that one of them just became an American citizen. But there was one other thing that was really interesting, I think, about that image. And I think that many of you caught that. And that's that nobody in that image was embarrassed to be engaging in murderous, painful, deadly racism. No one was embarrassed about it. Now, I ask people a lot of times, in terms of civil rights, in terms of our fight in order to get equal rights for people in America, have we had any progress? Have things changed? And if you ask 20-year-olds that question, a lot of times they'll say, nope, it's still just as bad as it ever was. But I think that image shows that clearly there's a moment when it was much worse than it is right now. The theme today is, have we achieved the dream? Surely we've made some progress. I'm not sure whether or not we've achieved the dream. So I got another image for you. I don't know if Mickey Lou is going to be doing all this work. All right. Take a look at this image. So here's my question about this image. What do these two people have in common? All right, so I'll ask it a different way. What do George Bush and Taylor Swift have in common? You guys know Taylor Swift, the pop music artist? They were both upstage like Kanye West. Back in 2009 or 2010, Kanye West ran on stage while Taylor Swift was supposed to be getting an award, and he said, she shouldn't get this award. Beyonce knows is supposed to get this award. Beyonce is better than Taylor Swift. Well, Kanye West, not one to ever hold his opinion back, did the exact same thing with George W. Bush. Thank you, Mickey. He, shortly after Hurricane Katrina, went on national television as part of a fundraiser, and instead of reading the script, he famously remarked that George Bush hates black people. He said, George Bush hates black people. Now here's what's really, I think, interesting and telling about that moment, is that a few years later, George Bush had written his manuscript about his experience in the office, and Matt Lauer was interviewing him on the Today Show, and Matt Lauer said, I have to ask you about this portion of your book, where you talk about the worst day of your presidency. And you said that the worst day of your presidency was the day when Kanye West accused you of being a racist. The lowest point in your presidency. Now, I remember the event called 9/11. That was kind of bad. I remember this incident in Abu Ghraib where there were prisoners who were paraded naked by the military and the entire country was embarrassed. Well, that was pretty bad. I remember Katrina itself. I remember people being stranded on the rooftops. And he didn't say Katrina was the issue. He said being called a racist by Kanye West was the problem. The worst day as president. I mean, this guy runs the United States of America. And that's the worst moment. So, now, while it's very funny and very interesting, and, let's hope that the current president will find a much more difficult moment to be the worst moment of his presidency. There is this interesting point about the idea that people in that lynching image were not embarrassed at all about their pervasive, murderous racism. But years later, President Bush is embarrassed simply to be called a racist. It's no longer fashionable or stylish or fun to be a racist. I think it says a lot about how far we've come. It's not acceptable to be a racist anymore. I've heard some folks say not openly. I would take that in the amendment. Absolutely. It's not acceptable to openly portray yourself as a racist. Certainly demonstrates that we've had incredible progress. But this idea that's offered from the crowd that perhaps this is simply about the openness of racism, but that discrimination of all kinds perhaps happens behind closed doors or happens undercover, indicates that there's more to be done, that we haven't achieved this dream. And I think some of it has to do with the way that we think about things and the way that we conceive things quite differently. Because if you don't have folks using racial epithets anymore, then it's a different process of dealing with and combating racism. So I want you guys to stick with me here as we go through a bit of an experiment. So, like everyone to close your eyes for a moment. And I'd like you to picture an apple. Picture an apple. All right? You got your apple? All right, open your eyes. And how many of you saw this? Put your hands in. How many of you saw this? Saw that? It may be because a lot of you just ate the apples. All right, so some of you didn't put your hands up. How many of you saw this apple? Green apple. All right. Not a lot of greens in this room, but enough. So there are still some people who did not put their hands up there. What apple did you see? What? So are there people in this room who saw this apple? All right, we got one. All right. He's actually, looks like he's holding his apple. We got two. All right, so a few people who saw this apple. So what's interesting about this apple is that this apple, the company Apple, was founded in 1972. So if you were born before 1972, you literally couldn't conceive of this apple. I asked that same question. It's impossible for you to even think about it or conceive it. But this is a very simple question I'm asking you guys. I'm asking you guys to picture an apple, and the idea that in this room, people can have at least 3 different images of what an apple looks like. And I bet you there are more. There's some of you who saw an apple with a worm coming out of it. Some of you who saw the apple being handed to a teacher. Some of you who saw the apple with a bite taken out of it. Right? All of you had a different image of what that apple looked like. So that's simple, right? It's just an apple. But then let's take it forward. Let's take it forward and think about, for instance, the work that Nikki Dean does at the Human Relations Commission. And it becomes quite different. Because everyone's in the same experience at the same moment, but seeing something different, seeing quite different apples at every moment. But we have this obligation, if people are being treated differently, to get to the bottom of it, to figure out what the difference in treatment is and why. You know, this quote that I love. It's yesterday unconsciously holds tomorrow hostage. Yesterday unconsciously holds tomorrow hostage. And it applies when you think about this, in this idea that the older you are, the less likely you are to see the Apple computer happen. Because you spent the majority of your life seeing one of these red apples or one of these green apples. And so there's this way in which it's hard for someone who spent their whole life seeing red and green apples to now see an Apple computer as an apple. Yesterday could consciously hold tomorrow hostage. So let me try this again. And let's try it from a civil rights context. So I want everyone to close your eyes again. And this time I want you to picture dogs. Dogs. All right. So open your eyes. And how many of you saw these kinds of dogs? All right. Cute puppies. All right. Cute dogs. And how many of you saw your own dog? How many of you have a pet at home and saw your own dog? So, but here's the civil rights context. If you would ask my grandfather the same question, this is what he would have said.
This is what I see.
The dog being sick viciously on a person simply protesting non-violently for basic human rights in Alabama. His concept of the dog is quite different. As a matter of fact, you know, there are many older men in the African American community who, when you talk about dogs, when they see dogs, first they're afraid of them because dogs are not pets, but in fact, dogs are weapons of the state used against them, that were used against citizens. Weapons of the state that were used against citizens. So, flash forward, for instance, to the Michael Vick movement. When there was a fundamental difference in America about whether or not Michael Vick had done something wrong. There were some folks who said that what he did was absolutely inhumane and evil, the way that he allowed those dogs to be murdered in that way. There were other folks who said, what's the big deal? And I'm not here to argue either side, but I am here to say that it's completely reasonable to see that debate through very different lenses. You know, I'm from New Orleans, as you all know, and there's an image that I could show you of about a dozen dogs, happy and cheerful, on a bus, an air-conditioned bus, having a great time. You know, there's water, there's dog food, you know, the wind is kind of blowing, and their ears are flapping. And if you saw it, I love that picture if you like dogs, but if you're from New Orleans and you see that picture, you hate it. You can't stand it. It makes you upset in a very visceral way. The reason is that those dogs were being evacuated from the city of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. They were being evacuated while thousands and thousands of New Orleans residents were stranded in the Superdome, stranded in the convention center. They were stranded without water, stranded without working restrooms, stranded without food, for at least 2 weeks. But during those 2 weeks, they were able to get the dogs out. It's easy to see how people can see the same thing quite differently. As I said, I'm from New Orleans, and you know, it's been striking here in Kansas City to see all the ways in which New Orleans and Kansas City are so similar. We both have really important histories related to jazz. We're both extremely committed to our sports teams. I won't fight you guys about the fact that Saints are going to win the Super Bowl. Just see it happen. So, you know, I don't get to see Mark that often, but the way that I do get to see him usually is either he gives me or I give him a hard time about what's going to happen in the Super Bowl. I've been quiet over the last year or so. But there are a lot of ways in which our cities are quite similar. One of the ways, though, is that we both have a serious issue around poverty in our cities. And it's an issue that I think we haven't been able to find an answer to. And so I want to ask the crowd a question before we proceed here. It's a simple question, but I think it's fairly broad in the concepts that can evolve around it. Why are people poor? What'd you say? I'll come to you. What'd you say? Economics? I got population control, and what was the word over here?
No jobs.
Misuse of money, what else?
Education.
Education. What about education?
They don't have good education.
They don't have good education. And what about public schools? Closing of the schools. Can't talk about ourselves and we can't respect ourselves. Because others are very rich. No, I mean, that's a real concept, right? It's this basic idea that the capitalist system in America is such that you gotta have some folks who are going to be rich, you gotta have some folks who are going to be poor. That's interesting. You know, when I ask that question, I usually get two types of answers. I usually get people who suggest that the difference is about individual choices. You know, you guys have heard that, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. And so sometimes people will say, oh, well, people aren't working hard, they're not making the right decisions, and that's why people aren't. But then I also get the more systemic responses. And the majority of the folks in this room gave those kinds of responses. Failing education systems. The fact that the capitalism system is simply set up that way. How about the criminal justice system? How about the lack of fair and equitable health care? The way that these systems work. And, you know, I take things a step further. You know, as a housing person, I think there's a housing argument around the way that poverty happens. So, you know, at its most basic point, housing is property. It's really this ability to transfer, own, and sell property. That's really what we're talking about housing. And it happens to also have shelter. But so think about the history of the United States that really began this very grand experiment where for the first time people were able to own and transfer and sell property without being heavily encumbered by the government. You know, in the early days, if you lived in Europe and you tried to do something with property, all the work you did, all the profits really went to the king. They went to the government. But in America, it was different. If you farmed your land, if you grew your crops, if you took care of your cows, whatever profit came from it went in your pocket. And you could build a house, you could make more money, you could build a bigger house, you could buy more land, you could keep expanding your fortune. This idea of capitalism, this idea of property ownership was fundamental to building wealth in this nation. But think about this idea that there were some people who were not only not allowed to participate in this property transfer process, but in fact they were property. In fact, were property. African Americans came here as property. It's not until the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that there's any right by African Americans to sell, own, or transfer any property. And even that law, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, is not upheld in court until 1968, in a lawsuit called Jones versus Nye. It's only 45 years ago. Only 45 years ago that the Supreme Court finally agrees that black people have the same rights as white people simply to own, sell, transfer, or rent property. I know this is a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. How many people in this room are older than 45 years old? All right. So, for about 75 or 80% of the people in this room, there's some portion of your life when black people just don't have the same rights as white people to own property. Now, think about the wealth gap that exists in America. There's a huge wealth gap between African Americans and white Americans. And that wealth gap goes back to this very moment of African Americans arriving as property instead of being able to own property. In 1984, the median wealth of white families was $113,000. The median wealth for black families, $5,677. I heard you say that's a shame, but guess what? It's gotten worse. So we have this huge financial crisis, and in 2009, the average wealth of a white family jumps up to $265,000. The average wealth of an African American family, $28,500. A $235,000 gap. And if you are a single African American female head of household, the average is a negative $5,000. Negative $5,000. We've made some progress, which clearly it's not the same thing as slavery. Clearly there is the right to own property. But this wealth gap is tremendous. It's tremendous. And for most people who they evaluated, do you know where their wealth was? It wasn't in the bank. It wasn't in their outfits. It wasn't in their car. It was in their home. It was in their home. So, I think it's really easy. I was talking to a young lady from earlier who's a realtor, and I think it's really easy if you're a realtor or if you do some other kind of work in the real estate business, just kind of think of yourself as doing these basic transactions. But there's a way in which these basic transactions are fundamental to achieving this goal of equality in America. And the work that the Human Relations Commission does ensures that it's equitable, ensures that there's some opportunity so that we can bridge this wealth gap. And there are a lot of reasons to do it. I think, of course, it's better for everyone if folks have money, but at the end of the day, I think we all strive for a more equitable America, a more equitable Kansas City. But we're pretty far from it. So let me ask you a question. I want you to tell me the neighborhood. What neighborhood do African Americans in Kansas City live in?
East of True.
East of True. I get all kinds of neighborhoods coming. So what about Latinos? What neighborhood do Latinos live in? Is there a major Asian American population? And if so, where do they live? What about the rich folk? Where do rich folk live?
The rich
So let me ask you this question. Is Kansas City a segregated city? The goal of the Federal Fair Housing Act, one of the laws that Mickey Dean and his staff work on, is to integrate communities. And despite all the work that's been done, we're still quite far from achieving that goal of integration. And the same is true in my hometown of New Orleans. I can tell you where each group of people is. One time I was talking to a guy from New York, and he was talking, about the South and saying, "Oh, you guys in the South, y'all segregate communities, and up here in New York, everybody's together because everybody catches the summer together." I said, "Excuse me, I just went to Chinatown, and nobody spoke English. And then I went across the street to Little Italy, and I thought I was in a mob movie. And I had never seen that many Chinese in one place. I said, and when I went up to Harlem, everybody thought I lived right down the block. So, the truth is that it's almost impossible to find an American city that is not segregated. It's almost impossible to find an American city that's not segregated. And I think the myth is that this segregation is happening by choice. That people decided to live where they wanted to live, and they decided to segregate themselves away from other people. But I think a lot of folks in this room know that that's not true. You just fundamentally know that it's not true. You know, the way that the American middle class was created was really through the GI Bill and the FHA loan program. And those programs had prohibitions on who could get loans. So the way that suburbs were built was that people returning from fighting the war would come and get their GI loan and build a house or buy a house right in the suburbs. And that's part of the reason that we can build this wonderful interstate system that we have in America. But if you were African American, you could not get those loans. You were prohibited from getting those loans. And so it was automatically true through a government program that we were creating and building segregated communities. And that goes true for the suburbs that surround Kansas City, the suburbs that surround New Orleans, the suburbs that surround any American city. Integration isn't by mistake, it's by design. And so I think the question becomes, if you look at these problems, this wealth gap, this persistent problem of segregation in our communities, the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? And that's where all of you come in. I want to tell you, I don't know what the world looks like on time, but I want to give you a few quick stories about some cases that we worked on in New Orleans, to give you some ideas about what you can do. So shortly after Hurricane Katrina, I was in Baton Rouge, the capital of Louisiana. This is about a week or two after the storm, and I was trying to figure out what was going to happen next. We didn't even know we still had a city in this group, and I didn't know there was going to still be a need for the fair housing center. And I was getting all kinds of phone calls on my cell phone. I still don't know how so many people got my cell phone. And but one guy called. He said, "I need you to go to KatrinaHousing.org. And I need you to look at the discrimination that's on that website." And I said, well, I just don't have time to do that right now, because as a matter of fact, I don't quite know where I'm going to live right now. And, discrimination is a problem, but right now, everybody's looking for housing. And, I just don't think discrimination is as bad as problem as you're alleging it is. And this is coming from, I consider myself a real rights guy. But so he was persistent. He would not let me get off the phone until I agreed to go to that website that day. So I went to the website, KatrinaHousing.org, and I started looking at ads. I found an advertisement for an apartment in Alabama. And this apartment was available for rent. It was for Katrina evacuees, for people who were having a difficult time. The landlord talked about how she wanted to help, how she wanted to support people who didn't have housing. And then I get to the very bottom of the ad, and I'm going to read what it said. It said, "I would love to house a single mom with one child, not racist, but white only." Now, I'm not sure how you guys think this whole discrimination thing works. But this whole not racist, but white only thing, I think that is discrimination. I think that is racist. So I said, well, surely that's just an anomaly. But I went on, continued on the site, and the next ad I found said, not to sound racist, but because we want to make things more understandable for our younger child, we want white child. Not to sound racist. It doesn't sound that way to me. And remember, these folks had just seen on television one of the worst American disasters that we've ever seen. And they decided, we have houses, we have apartments, we want to help. And so the way that they help is to place these ads. Next advertisement said, provider will provide women board for $400, prefers 2 white females. Now this one I think had something different in mind. Prefers 2 white females. But still, nonetheless, it's probably not just racial exclusion, but there's probably some sexual harassment that's going to happen here. Again, this is someone who says that they want to help. The next advertisement said, prefer white Catholic family. Children love. Now, how many folks in this room are church-going people? All right. So this person says prefers white Catholic family. In an effort to support their commitment to their religion, they seek to exclude people based on their religion. Room available to single white mother with child or younger to middle-aged white couple. So, needless to say, I spent the rest of my day on that website. I put together about 50 pages of advertisements. 50 pages of advertisements. I was shocked. I was blown away. And long story short is that it's illegal to place these kinds of ads in a newspaper. But there's an interesting law, the Communications Decency Act, that doesn't hold Craigslist or any other website accountable when these kinds of ads are placed online. And so we ended up in protracted litigation that still hasn't seen justice based on these advertisements. I'll tell you about a second case that we worked on. There's a community outside the Lower Ninth Ward called St. Bernard Parish. It's literally just past the Lower Ninth Ward. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of people think of Katrina as an African-American disaster. But the truth is, if the media had launched a few blocks further down, they would have found white families stranded on their rooftops in St. Bernard Parish. Because it's a 90% white community, or at least it used to be. After Hurricane Katrina, one of the folks, or the sheriff, had abandoned cars lined up at the border between the Lower Ninth Ward and St. Bernard Parish. His goal was to keep people from the Lower Ninth Ward from coming into St. Bernard Parish. Interestingly enough, he ended up trapping people in St. Bernard Parish in the parish. They couldn't get out. They couldn't get to safety. They were so worried about keeping the black folks out that they trapped themselves in, and they could not get to safety. They never made it to the news. So, St. Bernard Parish, about a year after Hurricane Katrina, passed a law called the Blood Relative Ordinance. And the Blood Relative Ordinance says that you have to be related by blood to the person who owns the house that you want to live in. You have to be related by blood to the person who owns the house that you want to live in. And, right away I said, well, there's some constitutional issues with that, because it really limits what you can do with your property. But, this parish is 90% white. I just wondered if they're doing that to keep African Americans out of the parish. Because I tell you what, if you want to find the Ku Klux Klan in Louisiana, then historically you go straight to St. Bernard Parish and you can find a meeting on most nights. So we were still contemplating, trying to figure out what to do. And my organization, we sent out a press release saying that they might file suit if they didn't retract the ordinance. So I got a phone call from a member of the St. Bernard Parish Council. I missed it, and I listened to the message, and I was like, whoa, I'm not sure if I want to take this call, because I knew exactly what it was. This guy is an older guy who had been on the council for a very long time, and he was known for using racial epithets in council meetings. Right, so he would use the N-word at the city council meeting, just in passing. Right? And so I regarded him, as most people did, as a really serious racist. And I said, well, I'm not sure what good there is to be talking to this guy. Let me ask my, the staff attorneys what they think we ought to do. And but he called back, and I made a mistake and answered the phone. And as soon as he said hello, I said, why did I get myself on this people? So he says, James Perry, we need to talk. Because this ordinance that you're concerned with, I gotta tell you, it is all about racism. This is just discrimination. They're just doing this to keep the black people and the Latinos out of the parish. And I support your lawsuit. I said, wait, who is this? Anytime something that you're doing is so racist that it's too racist for the most racist person you know, so we ended up suing the parish of force and forcing them to overturn that ordinance. So look, here's the point. I've told you about two cases, but I can tell you about case after case after case We had another case against the federal government, the state government, that won $500 million to get people back into their homes in Louisiana. So I can keep telling you about these cases. And as you can see, we're mitigating, we're taking these issues on, but it's not enough. Because just like Kansas City, just like I said, New Orleans is still quite segregated. And discrimination still happens every single day. Every day. And so the question becomes, what do we do? What's the next step? I heard that when Mark spoke this morning, I was very sorry that I missed it, but I heard that he said he went to do something. That you can't, it's not enough to just sit around and talk about it, but you have to actually do something. And clearly the staff and the commission are doing something every single day, and you gotta support them. But guess what? Kansas City previously had a private nonprofit fair housing organization like mine, and there wasn't enough support for it. They couldn't raise enough money. They went out of business. They went out of business. You have organizations in your community right now who are working every single day to ensure civil rights, to ensure equal rights, to ensure that every single person has opportunity in Kansas City. You have the NAACP. You have folks working on behalf of the lesbian and gay community. You have people working on behalf of people who are undocumented. You have folks working every single day. And the question is simply, what are you going to do? Or are you going to support? You know, when we started this conversation, I talked about the way that we have these very different images of everything that we see. And then I also talked about the way that our images from yesterday can sometimes unconsciously hold our futures hostage. And I fear that when it comes to this idea of progress in civil rights, progress in our communities, progress in Kansas City, that's precisely what happens. I had the great pleasure of meeting Ruth Bates yesterday and hearing about her experience, hearing about the fight that she had in City Hall, when all she wanted was to get paid the same as the other folks in City Hall. That's all she wanted. And instead, the city, rather than pay her another $10 an hour, would rather fight this thing out until the end, in which case she gets $600,000. It's a lot more per hour. The success, our ability to be successful in this fight is going to come from all of the mistakes that we made over time. So there are going to be cases that we fight and we win. There'll be cases that we fight and we lose. There'll be issues that folks like Nikki Dean will take on where they're greatly successful. And there'll be some where they won't be successful. But those failures will be the very ink that writes our success in the future. They will teach us the path to future success. And with that ink, we have an opportunity to paint a picture. We can paint a picture of Kansas City that is a picture of equality. We can paint a picture of Kansas City that is a picture of loveliness. We can paint a picture of inclusion. We can paint a picture where we can make sure that the next young African American woman who goes to work at City Hall is paid the same as her male counterparts. But I tell you what, it doesn't happen simply by coming to this luncheon. It doesn't happen just by going online and tweeting or Facebooking one or two things. But you have to invest your time, you have to invest your money, you have to actually show up. Have we achieved the dream? No, we haven't. But can we achieve the dream? Absolutely. And I challenge you, Kansas City, to stand with me, to stand with the Human Rights Commission, and to work until we achieve that dream. Thank you so much for your time.